Hello everybody, this is General Yanis, and today in Death Guard Tactics we will be looking at plague weapons, which units in the Death Guard roster actually have access to plague weapons, and what are the synergies of plague weapons with Death Guard abilities. So let's look at this. So, first of all, the plague weapons for me are another trademark of the Death Guard, is the ability to have this or the arsenal of plague weapons. And plague weapons have the ability to reroll once to wound, which is very helpful to achieve more wounds, and have several great synergies with various Death Guard stratagems, psychic powers, and abilities that I will be coming back to later. And thematically, I think also plague weapons fit very well with Death Guard. You can imagine the sort of contaminated or foul weapons that barely need to touch the opponent to make damage. So it fits very well, but however, not all Death Guard units have access to plague weapons. So let's take a look on which ones have. So in this table, we have the Death Guard units, HQ troops and dedicated transport. And here in this table, you can see if a unit has access to plague weapons, be it range weapon or like a shooting weapon or a melee weapon. And the blight grenade that some units have, remember that this is also a plague weapon, and now in 9th edition it's a blast weapon. So if we start looking at the HQ choices, no HQ character have access to shooting plague weapons, unfortunately, not even Mortarion. And for me also is a bit strange why Typhus Destroyer Hive, which seems to be, let's say, flies or bees buzzing around, they should be carrying some plague of some sort. But it's not considered a plague weapon, unfortunately. But we can see that most of the HQ characters have plague weapons for melee, but unfortunately not the Demon Prince of Nurgle. And the Demon Prince of Nurgle for me is a good HQ character with a reroll once to hit, and also it's fast and good in melee. So it would be great if it could have plague weapons, but we will get back to this later. Looking at the troops choices, only Plague Marines have access to plague weapons. For shooting, there are some plague weapon options for some models in the squad, but then for Plague Marines, all the melee weapons are basically plague weapons. Other troops don't have access to any plague weapons, like the Poxwalkers and the Cultists. And the Chaos Rhino does not have any plague weapons either. And as I said before, remember that the blight grenades that a lot of units carry are a plague weapon. So let's continue with the rest of the Death Guard units. So in this table we have the elites, the fast attack and heavy support unit. If we start with the elite characters, typically they have plague weapons for either melee or ranged combat. So we see the Biologus Putrifier has both shooting and melee weapon that are plague weapons. The Foul Blightspawn has his plague, basically a plague flamer. So in shooting he has the plague weapon, but not in melee. The Noxious Blightbringer, Plague Surgeon, and Taliman don't have a shooting plague weapon, but the Blightbringer and the Surgeon, they have a melee plague weapon. And if we see at the BlightLord Terminators, the situation is quite similar to the Plague Marines. The Terminators have some shooting plague weapons that they can choose, but not for all models. And for melee, they all have plague weapons, and the Death Shroud Terminators have all their weapons are plague weapons. If we go to fast attack, the 30th Blow Drone, all its weapons are plague weapons, so it's excelled in this. And the Blight Hauler has at least one weapon, shooting weapon, that is plague weapon, and also in melee it has plague weapon. The Cow Spawn does not have. And if we look at the heavy support units, the Plague Burst Crawler has at least one weapon on it that is plague weapon, but can also be upgraded by stratagem, which I will be talking about a bit later. But not in melee, they doesn't have plague weapon. And we see that the other heavy support choices like the Defiler, the Chaos Predator, and the Chaos Land Raider, they don't have plague weapon options, which of course is a bit hindering for the synergies of stratagems and warlord traits that I was talking about before. So let's continue and look on some units in more detail about the plague weapon options they have. So if we look at the Plague Marines, for melee weapons, nearly all melee weapons for the Plague Marines are plague weapons. The standard option for each Plague Marine, even the champion, is a Plague Knife, which is of course a plague weapon. Up to 2 models per squad can take the Flail of Corruption, which is a really good weapon, of course also plague weapon. We have the option of the Great Plague Cleaver, also a plague weapon, and this can be taken instead of the Flail of Corruption, but I think for most applications the Flail of Corruption is the best. And then we have a Mace of Contagion, a Bubotic Axe that can be taken by any amount of models instead of the replacing the Bolter. And we have for the champion, he can take the Plague Sword instead of the Plague Knife, which is a plague weapon as well. And the only thing in the arsenal for Plague Marines that is not a plague weapon is the Power Fist of the champion. So consider for the points value, maybe it's better not to take the Power Fist and just use the Plague Knife or Plague Sword for the champion. If we look at shooting weapons, there is unfortunately few plague weapon options. So we have to look at the special weapons for the unit, and we can only have up to 2 per squad. So 2 models can take either Blight Launchers, Plague Belcher, Plague Spewer, Melta Gun, or Plasma Gun. And with green are the plague weapons, of course. And Blight Launchers, in my opinion, is the best option. They are assault weapon, 2 shots at 24 inches, do quite a nice damage with a high strength. So I think for me this is the best option. But if we look at the the standard weapon for the Plague Marines is the Bolter, just a normal bolter, which is not a plague weapon. And there is unfortunately no plague weapon shooting option for the champion. So he can basically keep the bolt pistol, he can take plasma gun or plasma pistol, but those are not plague weapons. So summarizing, all models have basically melee plague weapons, but only 2 plague weapons can be used for shooting per squad. If we continue looking at some other units, let's see at the BlightLord Terminators. Their options in melee, the standard option is the Bale Sword or Bubotic Axe that are both plague weapons, and 1 per 5 models can substitute the weapons to a Flail of Corruption, which again is really good. Of course, the Flail of Corruption can do even more damage at the hands of the Terminator, which has more attacks than the Plague Marine, but still the weapon is the same. So again, all melee weapons for the BlightLords are plague weapons. But if we look at the shooting range options, there is again only few plague weapon options. So the standard option for the BlightLord Terminators are various combi weapons, but the combi weapons don't include any plague weapons. So 1 per 5 models can take a special weapon, and it can choose between the Blight Launcher, which is the same as the Blight Launcher for the Plague Marines, the Plague Spewer, and the Reaper Autocannon. So the Blight Launcher and the Plague Spewer are plague weapons, and the Reaper Autocannon is not. And I think the most desirable weapon, the best weapon here, I think again would be the Blight Launcher. The Plague Spewer could also be good in if you come in close combat, but I think its 9-inch range is not optimal with the deep strike ability that when you deep strike your Terminators, you will be at least 9 inches away, and you cannot use the Plague Spewer after having teleporting in to shoot. So it's a bit of a waste, in my opinion. I think in this case it's better to take the Blight Launcher. So let's continue on some other select units. So I was talking before about the Demon Prince of Nurgle. Unfortunately, it doesn't have any plague weapon options. The Malefic Talons, the Hellforged Sword, and the Demonic Axe are not plague weapons, but now there is hope. From the new Psychic Awakening, we got a new Death Guard relic, the Epidemicist Blade, which is a plague weapon. And this with this relic, it upgrades a Hellforged sword to a plague weapon with a nice extra strength and nice extra abilities, meaning that on a 6 to hit, it generates extra wounds. So it's really a good weapon for the Demon Prince of Nurgle. If you have him equipped with Hellforged sword, definitely worth taking. I believe the Epidemicist blade. And then gaining a lot of good synergies from the plague weapon. And then finally, if we look at the Plague Burst Crawler, its standard weapon is its mortar, which is a plague weapon. And then for sponsor weapons, it has two options: the Plague Spitters, which are plague weapons, or the Entropy Cannon, which is not. But we'll come back to that. And in the hull weapon, we have the choice of Heavy Slugger or Rothail Volley Gun, but neither of those is a plague weapon or can be upgraded to a plague weapon. So for the sponsor weapons, the Plague Spitters could be a good option for close range if you want to advance your Plague Burst Crawlers and get in your face of your opponents. Plague Spitters could be a good choice. But the Entropy Cannons is the better option for long range, high damage against vehicles and monsters. It's basically like a las cannon. And now with the new Psychic Awakening and the new stratagems, now the Entropy Cannon can be upgraded before battle with the stratagem Accelerated Entropy for 1 command point. Then this means that entropy cannons of all Plague Burst Crawlers within 7 inch of the upgraded Plague Burst Crawler gain the Plague Weapon ability and also a minimum 3 of damage instead of the d6 damage that can give you 1 or 2 wounds. Here you would at least get minimum 3 and possibility for 4, 5, 6. So I think this is really a good idea to upgrade Plague Burst Crawlers with accelerated entropy, and thus having 2 plague weapons on your Plague Burst Crawler. Finally, let's look at some of the plague weapon death card synergies and tactics. So if we look at what type of synergies we have, first of all, there is the Warlord trait of Arch Contaminator, which is very useful. So the Arch Contaminator Warlord trait allows to reroll all 2 wound misses for plague weapons within 7 inch of the Warlord. Obvious good choice for an army with many plague weapons, giving you a lot of rerolls. Of course, so the more plague weapons you have, the more you will be able to reroll if you have the Arch Contaminator close by. Additionally, now we also have a new stratagem that can be used before battle, Hypertoxic Tinctures for 1 command point. This gives a Plague Surgeon a 6-inch aura to reroll wound rolls of 1s and 2s for plague weapons. So in essence, the Plague Surgeon becomes like a mini Arch Contaminator. So it could be that your Warlord could have the Arch Contaminator, you could take a Plague Surgeon with the Hypertoxic Tinctures, and then you could have sort of two Arch Contaminators running around and assisting your troops. For psychic powers, the obvious one is Blades of Putrefaction. So with this psychic power, it adds 1 to the wound rolls of a unit, and if a 7+ is scored with a melee plague weapon, So if you hit 6 to wound in close combat with a plague weapon, then it deals you can deal additional mortal wound. So this is an amazing power to cast on a large group, for example, of plague marines or the BlightLords or other units that are good in melee and have many attacks. This is a very good synergy with his psychic power and the melee plague weapons that a lot of Death Guard units have. If we if we look at some synergies and tactics during the battle, there are a few stratagems that can be useful. So I've selected 3 here for this purpose. So one of them is called virulent rounds. So it's one command point in the shooting phase and target a plague marine unit. And in this case, the bolt weapons of the normal bolt weapons, which you will be having a lot of, I guess, count as plague weapons for this phase, allowing the rerolls, and if the Arch Contaminator is close by, of course, then it gives even better rerolls. And additionally, unmodified 6 to wound rolls versus infantry give it -4 AP. And this stratagem can also be combined further with other stratagems, for example, giving extra shots to bolter weapons for even greater damage and even more, let's say, chance to get the 6 to wound. Another interesting stratagem is the Life Eater. So this can be used in the fight phase for one command point, a Death Guard unit making attack with melee plague weapons. So in that case, the 6 to hit wounds automatically, so there is no wound roll, and this is great for example, for a large unit of plague marines with plague knives that only have strength 4. Then hitting a lot of 6s, then you would get automatically a lot of wounds. And this stratagem combines well with, for example, the trench fighter stratagem, which gives 1 extra attack for plague knives. So in this case, you could have a plague marine squad that has charged, got an extra attack. With the trench fighters, gets even more attack, and with the Life Eater, then it can make automatic wounds on 6s. Finally, another stratagem is the Overwhelming Generosity, which is 1 CP in the shooting phase. You can select a Death Guard unit, and it exchange the range of plague weapons by 6 inches. The shooting, of course, plague weapons, and this can be really good for the spitters of the Blow Drone or the plague spewers of a BlightLord, for example, and especially for the Foul Blightspawn, this fantastic weapon with to make it from 9-inch to a 15-inch weapon. So these are some examples of the synergies, and of course, re-rolling with an Arch Contaminator close by ensures that you will be getting much more damage with the plague weapons rather than standard weapons. Finally, summarizing, so plague weapons, they have the ability to offer rerolls of 1 to wound. In general, the plague weapons have great synergies with Death Guard Warlord traits, stratagems, relics, and psychic powers. Unfortunately, a lot of units cannot get any or many plague weapons, but with a new Psychic Awakening, some new relics and stratagems can upgrade more weapons to plague weapons, increasing the function and how helpful the plague weapons are. So this concludes the video. If you enjoyed the video, you can press like and subscribe to my channel. If you have some comments on plague weapons and maybe some other synergies and strategies that you enjoy using, please leave a comment, and you can watch. You can also see some other videos from my channel where I be discussing about Death Guard tactics. So with these words, General Yanis will be signing out, and stay safe out there. Bye-bye.